I've had enough with their radical socialist agenda. Do you really believe Joe Biden is ready, willing, and most of all, able to do the same? As Joe says, come on, man. Joe Biden is being told what to do by the radicals running my former party, the same radicals trying to install him as their puppet president.
Democrat turned Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew tearing into his former party last night, saying a lot of Democrats support President Trump because they are disgusted by what their party has become, and that President Trump made him feel more welcome in the Oval Office than Nancy Pelosi ever did in her caucus. The New Jersey Congressman joins us now. Congressman, good morning to you. Thank you for being in here. What was that like for you to be on that stage with the spotlight on you, tearing into the party you were a member of for nearly 30 years?
Well, I just think I told the truth. It wasn't a matter of tearing in. It was just telling it as it was, as it is. And, you know, I think what's so important to realize is the contrast of these two conventions. I mean, this is really about the future. Which direction do you want to take? The direction that President Trump and many of the speakers laid out, or the direction of the Democratic Party? I think Americans believe that this is a good country and a country that has a tremendous future and a country that can do anything and where people can reach any aspiration. It was an aspirational convention. And I wanted to just point out to people who were Democrats and people who just wonder what's going on, that you don't have to be true to a party that is so substantively changed and no longer represents the party that you loved or that you knew or that your parents and grandparents knew. It's not the same party. It's not the same party at all. Things change, and that's changed a lot. And it's time for us to move on and make sure that our country has the future that we believe in.
You said a lot of Democrats are supporting President Trump because they're disgusted with what their party has become. What are you seeing on that front as far as the upcoming election?
Well, I think you're going to see that people are, many hardworking, people who just do their job every day and are looking for a good future in America. They believe in the rule of law. They don't believe what they saw outside the White House yesterday, or what's going on in Wisconsin, or what's going on in Portland, or what's going on in Seattle, or what's going on in Chicago. They don't believe that's right. And they don't believe that just giving in and not making sure that we have the rule of law is the right thing to do. They believe that we do need strong energy production. They do believe that we need to support our military. They do believe that we need, without question, not to defund, demean, or diminish our police. My God, when you see those clips you're showing of Ron Paul, I think, I'm sure he always knew the importance of police, but God, when you go through something like that, you really understand what those men and women go through, how many of them are hurt, how many of them literally are killed in this country every year. Yet we never talk about that. We should be honoring those folks for what they're doing. And yes, there could be 1 out of 1,000 that does something wrong, and that should be dealt with. That's what we do. America is a self-healing, self-correcting nation where we come together, every race, every color, every creed, and we work together and fight together to make America even better. The difference in the Democratic convention was it's almost like we're going to work to even bring us down more and say how we're not a good place. We're not the shining city on the hill. We're not this special place where we can all really grab the brass ring and do better. It was more about those images and what you really, felt about the country. You know what was great about yesterday? That was the America that we all know and love. It's okay to say God. It's okay to sing God Bless America. It's okay to have faith. It's okay to believe in family. It's okay to work hard. It's okay to obey the rule of law. It's okay to love our military and our police and our EMTs. It's all okay.
Congressman, you've got a big message to share, and we're hearing a lot of that here. We heard a lot on that stage last night. But if I could finally ask you about something, I just hit on this with Bill McGurn. It's the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal this morning. And in their piece, they say that the verdict for them is that Donald Trump's been better on policy than we feared, but worse on personal behavior than we hoped. So finally, what is your message to those Democrats that might be on the fence, who they might like some of the things they heard and saw at the Republican convention this week, but they still question the president's behaviors. Or like Ivanka Trump said, she addressed his tweeting in her speech last night. What is your message to those Democrats that are on the fence and haven't quite decided yet?
This isn't a competition about behavior. This is a competition about getting the job done, loving America, and keeping the America that we know and have loved. That's what Donald Trump represents. He says things that he believes. I mean, you're not going to change the man. He's still going to tweet and he's still going to say things that he believes in, and sometimes he might be a little bit rough around the edges. He's not a politician. He's a builder. He's a person who created a lot of entrepreneurial endeavor in the country and certainly in the New York area. So he's a different kind of person, but that's okay because the net result is that he's done good. Look at all those individual families and people.
We heard a lot of voices this week for sure.
You sure did, and there are many more voices out there. There's many things people don't know. How many people we bring back from other countries where they weren't safe? How many people we help? You don't hear those. Those are the real things.
Congressman, we can tell you've got a lot to say. Well, you're a big voice, obviously, in this election, having been a Democrat for multiple decades and now a Republican supporting the president. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.